this is your first time joining us in this format, an extra special welcome to you. We also want to offer a few tips on how to make the most of this experience. Be sure to crank up the volume during the music and sing along. Don't worry, we can't hear you. Musicians, download the music charts below the video, grab your instrument, and play along. For any kids participating with us, don't worry if you don't know or can't read the words. Just sing, dance, or make music of your own. We're so happy when you join in with us. If English isn't your first language or you experience hearing challenges, we encourage you to turn on the closed captioning on this video or download the transcripts for this morning's message. And be sure to download the Southridge app. This is the best way to stay connected and informed about everything that's going on here at Southridge. It's completely free and super easy to use. For the next hour, I invite you to engage with this experience, just as if you were with us in person. You're surrounded by a community of diverse, curious, open-minded, and inclusive people, all desiring to tap into the power and presence of God together as we worship, pray, listen, laugh, and grow. There might be some things we do or say today that really resonate with you, and that's great. There might also be things that stretch and challenge you, and we think that's good too. Ultimately, we encourage you to engage openly, thoughtfully, honestly, and wholeheartedly, trusting that the God we're here to connect with is a God who above all else is love. So as we begin our time together, wherever and whenever you are, whether this is your first time with us or you've been around forever, we hope that for the next hour you feel like you're among friends. Welcome to Southridge. We're so glad you're here.
How do you feel when you sit down to spend time with Jesus? Do you find yourself able to engage deeply with God as soon as you click play on a video like this? And if you do, I'd love to know your secret. For most of us, it takes some time to quiet ourselves and tap into the deeper spaces to open up to God, doesn't it? It can be hard to be ready to go right off the bat. Now, we often start our experiences off with high energy and upbeat songs and invitations, but today we're going to try something a bit different. So let's start by just taking a few deep breaths to slow our hearts and our minds and our bodies down. We don't do that very often, do we? But doesn't it help? So as we start to slow down and start to consciously orient ourselves towards God, let's let the words of this chorus be part of our prayer.
May your love cause us to open up, cause us to open up our hearts.
I'm going to lead us through a prayer, and I'll invite you to participate by following the actions along as we speak to God using our bodies as well as our minds. Then after each section, we'll leave a bit of space for you to let it sink in personally. So start by placing a hand on your head or your forehead. I open my mind today, God. Would you teach me the wisdom of your upside-down kingdom? The priorities, perspective, and principles of a God who would lay down his life for love. I open my mind to you. Just take a minute with that.
May your love cause us to open up, cause us to open up our hearts.
Now place a hand somewhere near your eyes. I open my eyes, Jesus, eager to see you in the spaces around me, both visible and invisible. Don't let me miss you today. I open my eyes to you.
May your love cause us to open up, cause us to open up our
Now move your hands to your ears. I open my ears, Lord. Help me to hear your still, small voice. Help me to quiet the noise that drowns you out, both external noise and internal. Help me to hear what really matters. I open my ears to you.
May your love cause us to open up, cause us to open up our hearts.
Now place your hands on your stomach or wherever you think of as your gut. I open my spirit. I gladly enter into the place of mystery. Would you move in me with grace and power, enabling me to walk by a way I've not yet known? I open my spirit to you.
May your love cause us to open up, cause us to open up our hearts.
Now open up your arms wide as if to gather up something large. I open my arms. Would you fill them with those who you want loved today? May my arms be an extension of yours to those who need them most. I open my arms to you.
May your love cause us to open up, cause us to open up our hearts.
Now hold both hands open in front of you as if giving or receiving a gift. I open my whole life to you today, my Lord and my God. May I hold nothing back. May I close nothing off. May I never be the same from this moment forward, again and again and again. Jesus, would you do in me what only you can do? In your name, I pray. Amen.
May your love cause us to open up, cause us to open up our hearts. May your love cause us to open up, cause us to open up our hearts. Sing this out together. Breathe on me, breath of God, breathe on me. Breathe on me, breath of God, breathe on me. I come alive when you breathe on me. Yeah, I come alive when you breathe on me. songs from death to life for you alone. Awake my soul. Well, I've searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. The world's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. But then you came along and put me back together. Every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you know. There's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Oh, nothing is better than you. I know it's true, and I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you see them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Lord, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing, and you give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can again. You turn mourning to dancing. You turn beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn grace into guidance, and you turn bones into bodies, and you turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Oh, nothing is better than you. No, nothing. Sing again. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. No, nothing is better than you.
We are a diverse community of imperfect people. who see the church as less of something to go to and more of a life to be lived and shared with others.
We are continually growing in what it means to love one another, fighting for unity rather than fighting over unnecessary arguments.
We are living to serve this world in the way of Jesus, serving those in need and those on the margins, knowing that friendship truly makes the difference.
So if you're coming with questions or curiosities,
Hurts or frustrations,
joys or celebrations,
wondering if the church can bring clarity or hope,
or simply be a place to belong,
we invite you to be at home with us.
we invite you to explore with us.
we invite you to grow with us.
And we invite you to belong with us.
welcome to Southridge. We're glad you're here.
Hey there! My name is Andrea Jago Lynette, and I serve as the Welland First Impressions lead here at Southridge. We're so glad you're participating with us, and we hope this has already been a meaningful time for you. So I'm here in our St. Catharines location, and if you've never joined us for one of our in-person gatherings at one of our physical Southridge locations, we would love to have you consider joining us in person when you feel ready and able. Well, we're so grateful to have this online platform to share in this experience from wherever and whenever we find ourselves. We love it even more when we can gather together as a community. In fact, if you do come out, please come say hi to me or one of our many welcoming volunteers, and we'd love to get a small gift into your hands, just as a way of showing our appreciation for taking the time to come meet us in person. And as even more of an incentive, we actually have monthly welcome lunches for anyone who's looking to learn more about our community and wanting to connect with some folks over some delicious food. Just check out our events page on our website to see when an upcoming welcome lunch is happening. We'd love to meet you there. If, for whatever reason, you're not able to or not comfortable with joining us in person, please know that actually doesn't in any way exclude you from participating in community with us. If you need to touch base with a pastor for any reason, please simply fill out one of our Connect cards. We can't wait to hear from you. For those of us who call this community home, one of the ways we practice togetherness and express our gratitude to God and generosity to others is by regular financial contributions. This is one of the ways we can invest our lives in what God is doing in and through our church family, making a difference by meeting needs among us across our region and around the world. All of our online giving options are available on our website, and so if you're able to give this week, we invite you to do so in a spirit of joy and generosity, and we thank you in advance for your faithfulness. That's it from me. Now we're going to hear this week's talk together. As we do, I invite you to remove as many distractions as possible and listen in to what God might want to be saying uniquely to you.
How many of you, when it comes to the stories that you read or the shows or the movies that you watch on TV, love surprises? Do you love a surprising twist of events or a surprise ending? If you do, I think you're going to really enjoy the passage in the book of Philippians that we're going to look at today. If you have a Bible with you or a Bible app on your phone or your personal device, turn to Philippians chapter 1, and we're going to continue on in this series looking at this first section of text of Paul's letter to this church in Philippi, where Paul essentially in this section provides three escalating surprises. That's what we're going to look at today. The three escalating surprises provided in this text by the Apostle Paul, beginning in verse 12, where he says this. He says, "Now, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. This is surprise number one. Actually, it's kind of two surprises in one. Both the content is a surprise and sort of the nature of this content would be kind of a bonus surprise, but I'll consider this surprise number one. First of all, the content is a surprise. When he says that what's happened to him has actually served to advance the gospel. When he's referring to what's happened to him, Paul is referring to his imprisonment in Rome. And if you're unfamiliar with kind of the background, I'd encourage you to read the latter chapters of the book of Acts, where this former Jewish leader, Pharisee, Christian church persecutor, Paul, who became a convert and follower of Jesus and real messenger of his life-changing message of love, was really on the move and was antagonizing the Jewish leaders and even the civic authorities because of the impact of the spread of the message of Jesus. And so eventually they were trying to kind of charge him with some things. And in response, Paul appealed to Caesar. He said, I want to take this case all the way to Rome. I want to appeal to Caesar. And that's what has him in this Roman prison awaiting trial. And so one would assume that since Paul was kind of put into prison for preaching the message of Jesus, that the spread of Jesus' message would be stifled. But Paul is saying, in fact, it's been stimulated. And that's kind of surprise number one. Now, the bonus surprise, if you were a first century reader, especially from the church in Philippi, is that this is what Paul introduces here. Remember last week we learned that the nature of the letter of the book of Philippians is a friendship letter. It's of people exchanging heartfelt love who've been longtime friends. And after a short introduction in kind of the technical ingredients of a friendship letter, the next move would be to update on how you were doing personally. And Paul seems to start off that way, where he says, I want you to know, dear brothers and sisters, and you would expect him to update them on how he's doing personally, how he's feeling, how his health is getting along, whether he's met any friends, has he read a good book lately, all this kind of personal stuff. But Paul feels so passionately about the surprising spread of the message of Jesus, what he calls the gospel, that this is what he chooses to communicate when you would expect him to share on how he's doing. In fact, how he's doing is synonymous with how the message and movement of Jesus is spreading. That's the first surprise. He goes on to provide some detail as to how that has surprisingly happened, how the movement and message of Jesus has continued to spread, even though it was intended to be stifled by his imprisonment. In verse 13, he says, as a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I'm in chains for Christ. And number two, he says, because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. Here, the two implications of Paul's imprisonment are effects, first of all, internally in the Roman prison system, and then externally among the church of Rome, what he calls the brothers and sisters. Starts off talking about internally with the whole palace guard. Basically, as Paul was imprisoned at Caesar's palace, the Roman guard that would kind of look after him and guard him worked on rotating shifts of about every 4 hours. So you think, Paul's in there days and months and even years, and 4 hours goes by, 4 hours goes by. He would have interacted with a lot of people for a long time. And these people got the chance to be captivated by his life and message because he says he's in chains for Christ. It's an interesting term if you're studying this, that he says he's in chains for Christ. It's kind of a double entendre because he doesn't just mean that he's in chains because of Christ. He's in chains because he's been preaching the message of Jesus. But he also, by saying he's in chains for Christ, is kind of implying that he's modeling the very way of Jesus, that he's in chains as Christ, and that he's entering into the way of life of the suffering servant of Jesus. And it's because of his message around the Roman prison, and more importantly, the medium that is the message of his life imprisoned for the sake of Jesus, that he's having a compelling impact spreading the message of Jesus among this Roman palace guard. Then because of that, there's a second implication among what he calls the brothers and sisters, the church at kind of nearby Rome. You can imagine that if you were part of the Roman church and the superstar preacher Paul was suddenly imprisoned for preaching, that it would kind of dial back the zeal or the intensity of how you would share your faith in public. But now that they've been able to see the impact of Paul's imprisonment, it's actually emboldened them as well. And they've been able to share the love and the life-changing message of Jesus with a greater degree of courage. Right, we look at these two dynamics, and in one sense, the message of Jesus is spreading wider, what in churchy words we refer to as evangelism. And in the other sense, the message of Jesus is kind of growing deeper and stronger in existing followers of Jesus, what we refer to as discipleship. And so both from the perspective of evangelism and discipleship, in growing wider and in growing stronger and deeper, the message of Jesus is surprisingly spreading in spite of Paul's imprisonment. That's the first surprise. Now, his next comment would serve as the second surprise, and it kind of takes you aback. In verse 15, he says, kind of a by the way comment, he says, now it is true that some preached Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. Shockingly, this group of brothers and sisters that are emboldened to share the message of Jesus, more courageously, Paul recognizes that many of them are actually doing it with mixed motives. And that would have been kind of a shock to a Philippian reader. And Paul goes on to explain and kind of describe what he means, actually in inverse order. So first of all, he describes what's going on with the good-hearted messenger, the person sharing their faith out of goodwill. He says in verse 16, the latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. He says that some of these spiritual siblings are kind of really partnered with Paul, almost like a sports team, where they recognize that Paul is playing the role of defense, actually defending the gospel while he's in prison, which to Paul is what he assumes is actually on trial. Paul's not on trial. The gospel of Jesus is. And their role is actually to kind of put the puck in the net or put the ball in the net to play the role of offense and move the Christian message and the movement forward. He's on defense, they're on offense, and they're working well together. But to this former group, the people who he says are preaching out of envy and rivalry, he says this in verse 17. He says, the former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I'm in chains. It says this first group preaches out of selfish ambition. Now, it's hard to know exactly what they're up to. What we can know for certain is that this group of ill-motived messengers of Jesus are not false teaching. They're not sharing or providing an inaccurate or a wrong message of Jesus. Consistently throughout the New Testament, even in the book of Philippians, Paul has harsh words for false teachers. In this case, it just feels like they're trying to take advantage of the fact that Paul's imprisoned, and as preaching and the message of Jesus is now regaining popularity, it's an opportunity for their personal star to rise. It's as if Paul's imprisonment has given them the opportunity to gain a platform. I don't know how they measured that in those days, whether it was YouTube views or Instagram followers, but in whatever way it meant to them, they were taking advantage and maybe even speaking ill of Paul in order to gain a following for themselves. That would have been the second surprise, that among these people who were sharing the message in Rome, some of them were doing it out of ill motive. But then in response to all of that, the Apostle Paul provides what I would say is the final and probably the most significant surprise in this chunk of text we're going to look at today. It concludes in verse 18. He says, but in light of these people, he says, but what does it really matter? So the important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached. And because of this, I rejoice. In spite of the fact that people are out to get him, in spite of the fact that people are stealing his platform, Paul doesn't care. He just celebrates the fact that the message and movement of Jesus is progressing. And in a way, that kind of bookends this section of text, where it started by Paul celebrating that the message of Jesus was advancing, and it kind of concludes with him rejoicing over the reality that the message of Jesus is advancing. And in between, he throws these surprises out in spite of the personal circumstances of his imprisonment and in spite of the personal hardship and the opposition that he was facing. This was happening, and to him, that's all that mattered. On top of the surprise that this is what he was sharing instead of his personal information, that this mattered so much to Paul to share about how he's doing personally. Well, the big question is, in lieu of all these surprises, why would Paul share this at this point to the church at Philippi? What does he want them to know and do? Well, remember that last week we learned that this whole letter, this friendship letter, is in the hopes that the Philippian church, using Paul's language from last week, would abound in love more and more, and through that abounding love, reveal Jesus to each other and to the world around them. That what Paul is hoping for amongst this vast diversity of people in the Philippian church is for them to experience harmony. And after teaching them the first how-to last week as to how that happens, by first things first, looking to the very source of love and the source of life in the person of Jesus himself through prayer, he teaches them the second how-to by demonstrating it in his own personal life. That in spite of personal circumstance and in spite of personal opposition, the way you experience harmony is by valuing the movement and the spread of the message of Jesus above all else. What Paul is teaching them is that the way harmony happens is by galvanizing around the commitment, the priority, and the intensity of a common cause, specifically the cause of the person of Jesus Christ. Now, in our day and age, I would say that this provides us with a deal-breakingly critical component of what it takes for us to experience harmony these days, and for the church in general to experience harmony and to celebrate an abounding love in a unity amidst all of our diversity. See, maybe counterintuitively, most of the time when we look at diverse groups and try to unify them together, we pay attention to the diversity and we try to understand the diversity and make accommodation for the diversity and tolerate the diversity and even orient ourselves to the other to kind of engage in reciprocity across the lines of diversity. The point is, so often we try to be united amidst our diversity by focusing on the diversity. What Paul teaches is that the key to actually embracing a life of harmony is actually to focus on what unites us, not just try to accommodate and work with what divides us. That what actually unites followers of Jesus and communities of faith together, and what allows us to reveal Jesus through growing in an abounding love and give off that fragrance of harmony, is a shared commitment and a shared passion, a shared priority, and a shared investment in not just the person, but in the purpose of Jesus. That the common cause of Christ is what unites in a way that intends to supersede our personal circumstances and even supersede our personal conflicts and personal opposition. The cause of Christ is to be the primary thing that unifies diverse groups of followers of Jesus. Last week, he taught that if we're going to be a harmony of love, it requires each of us and us together to behave as a symphony of prayer. This week, what he's offering up is that if we're going to be a harmony of love, it requires a single orchestrated purpose, and for each of us to be all into sharing in that purpose together. I think that when it comes to groups of people, we kind of know that common cause is what unites us. Remember Jerry Seinfeld joking about this years ago, wondering why it's so hard for people to get along these days. And he was talking about, when you're a kid, this is kind of intuitive. You're walking down the street, you see a kid with an ice cream cone, you say, "Hey, you like ice cream?" "Yeah, I like ice cream." "Really? You like ice cream?" "I like ice cream. Let's be best friends." And it's really that simple. Because common cause, Seinfeld understands, is, as kids, what immediately binds us together. As grown-ups, and especially in environments like church communities, that can be a little bit more complicated. But I've noticed, even in recent months, the very same thing to be true. In recent months around Southridge, we've been kind of spending time as a leadership, getting up close and personal with our membership and individually kind of hearing people's hearts on where our church is at and where we sense God leading us and whether we're supportive or struggling and things like that. And what I've noticed when it comes to unity and diversity is kind of this little equation that I've introduced to our leaders and to our board of elders to pay attention to. I've said to them, pay attention to whether Y equals Y. That's the math of kingdom unity and diversity, whether Y equals Y. And not just the letter Y, but literally the word Y, whether the word Y equals the word Y. And what I mean by that is whether the Y of why a person would be part of a church community is the same as the Y of why that community exists. If the Y equals Y, you have unity and can have unity and diversity. If the Y doesn't equal Y, you have bigger issues at play. And the truth is that, in the Christian church, even in our church, there are lots of different whys that people have for why they're a part of a church these days. Some people are part of a church, they say, because I was born there. It's been the only church I've ever known. I'm going to die here. It's, my lifelong church. I've been in church all my life. Some people feel like they're into that church because it's convenient. It's the one closest to my home, or I can get a ride to. For some, it's preferences. I like the coffee that they serve, or happen to like the music style there. For some, it's based on individual people. I like the preacher. Don't hear that as much, but or maybe my this is the church where my kids' friends go. There's all kinds of different reasons why people ultimately choose to be part of a specific faith community. The question is that the same reason why a church exists? Does Y equal Y? Or ideally, I would say, according to the Apostle Paul, does Y equal Y equal Y? Does the reason why a person is part of a church equate to the reason why that church exists? And does that equate to Jesus' purpose for the church to ultimately bring Jesus and his love to life, and in doing so, reveal his love and life-changing message to the world? See, the truth is, in our day and age, there's lots of diversity and lots of reason to divide over that diversity. Lots of reason to get polarized and subdivide, especially when you throw in, difficult circumstances and personal conflicts and oppositions. And in the church, we experience all this kind of stuff. We rub each other differently, and people have different beliefs on things that kind of move us in different directions relationally and in our chemistry with people, or we don't get to play the role that we used to, or the role that we'd ultimately aspire to, or somebody in the church has hurt us, or the list goes on. There's all kinds of reasons to divide. What Paul and God through Paul is inspiring us to consider today is, what is the reason we unite? And is the reason we unite the very reason that Jesus intends us to unite, and that is his cause in the world today? The action step for today's text in the book of Philippians, for you and I and us together today, is to take a moment and reflect on the way that we personally relate, not just to the person of Jesus, but to his purpose in our lives and together as a community. Are we engaged in that purpose? Or is our relationship with the church just kind of a place that we go for an event for an hour a week or so every once in a while? Are we engaged with a prioritization of this purpose? How much does this matter to us? And does it matter to us as much as it matters to Jesus? Or is our involvement in our faith community kind of intermittent and casual and haphazard, and when it's convenient for us? And most specifically, what does our investment in that purpose look like when we look at our time, our talents, our human resources and our gifts, and most importantly, our financial treasures? Are we invested with the kind of priority that Paul demonstrates here that's even more important than updating people on how he's doing? This to him matters the most because this to him matters the most to Jesus. Is this the thing that matters most to us? Or is it kind of an appendage to the real priorities, the real investments in our lives? The action step for today for us to reflect on personally and process in our life groups and with our friends and family members is the degree to which we're relating, not just to the person, but the purpose of Christ through a community like ours. Pastor Rick Warren said that years ago, this was the major issue that the church was facing when it came to it experiencing unity and diversity. He said the problem with the church is that 95% of people in the church these days believe that the purpose of the church is to meet their personal needs. And only about 5% believe that the purpose of the church is to reveal Jesus to the world around them. With church leaders, he said, it's the opposite. 95% believe that the purpose of the church is to reveal Jesus to the world around them, and only 5% believe that it's to actually cater to or meet people's individual needs. And that disconnect is one of the primary reasons that the church struggles. The question today is, what's our why? And can we be united around the Jesus why to reveal his life and love in the world where God's placed us? You gotta know, for the last 20 years or so, that's been our single and solitary why as a community, to make sense of Jesus where God's placed us, to bring his love to life, to reveal him in a medium is the message kind of a way. It's why we moved to St. Catharines in the first place almost 20 years ago. It's why when we did, we opened up a 24/7 homeless shelter. It's why we expanded into other regions in Niagara, into the Vineland, Lincoln area, and into the Welland, Pelham, Fonthill area. It's why all of 3 of our locations are more defined by our anchor causes, trying to make a compassion and justice difference, than our large group weekend gatherings. It's why over the years we've tried to gain ground in an experience of equality among men and women, serving and leading together better than we could on our own. It's why we've sought to gain ground in the inclusion of LGBTQ plus people. It's why we've tried to gain ground in becoming good relatives with Indigenous folks. Everything we've done year over year over year for the past 2 decades, if not beyond, has been because of this single solitary why: to bring Jesus to life. The way we often say it these days is because Jesus came to earth to incarnate love. We as his followers are invited personally and together to follow him in becoming love incarnate. That's our why. The question is that your why for being part of this community of spiritual siblings together? The message that Paul teaches in this section of Philippians is that the only way that 4 or 5 months from now, we're going to raise a glass to being this Jesus expressive community through an increasing, abounding in love for one another is because we've experienced harmony with each other. And the way harmony happens, the way you and I become a harmony of love, is by galvanizing around an orchestrated purpose. Because Jesus came to incarnate love, you and I and us together have the opportunity of a lifetime to grow together and follow him and become incarnate love, to be the medium that is the message that shares who he is in the world around us. But it requires engagement and commitment and prioritization and investment in that purpose. Because you don't experience unity in diversity by just focusing on and accommodating the diversity. It requires the unity of a common cause. It requires the unity around the person and, more importantly, the purpose of Jesus Christ. So let's appreciate that if we're going to become this harmony of love, it's only going to happen as we give our lives to galvanizing around an orchestrated purpose, the purpose of Jesus Christ. Let's pray together. Jesus, we just thank you for inviting us into participating with you in your purpose, for not just rescuing us as fallen, broken kids and adopting us as your children, as your family, but allowing us to be co-laborers with you and to be partners in this thing you call the gospel. I pray that you would inspire us. I pray that you would invite us anew into this adventure of a lifetime to give the very best of our lives to what matters most in the world, to you. And I pray that as we do, that we can experience the unity amidst the diversity of so many different people among us, that can result in a harmony that allows us to abound in love more and more and reveal who you are to each other and to the watching world. Make us those people. Give us that value, that commitment, that priority, that intensity of investment into your purpose, Jesus, and help us to enjoy the unity in diversity that results. We love you. We thank you for all these things. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
Take my life and let it be set apart, my Lord, for Thee. Take my moments and my days, let them flow in endless praise. Let them flow in endless praise. Take my hands and let them move at the impulse of Thy love. Take my feet and let them be swift and beautiful for Thee. Swift and beautiful for Thee. Take my voice and let me sing, always only for my King. Take my lips and let them be filled with messages from Thee. Filled with messages from Thee. Take my love, my Lord, I pour at Thy feet its treasure store. Take myself and I will be ever only all for Thee. Ever only all for Thee.
We are a community of imperfect people
who desire to put into practice the good news that we preach.
Our faith is not about an hour of watching or attending.
It's about a lifestyle of full devotion to Christ.
Not just a something to believe in, but someone to follow.
We don't want to talk a good game on Sunday,
only to remain unaffected or ineffective for the rest of the week.
So while we gather each week to sing, pray, listen, and learn,
we know that an hour a week will never produce the life change that we so desperately need.
It requires a daily investment of time and training.
It takes practice.
And practice.
And more practice.
And when we mess up, we forgive ourselves and each other.
Then help each other up and keep practicing.
As we go now into the rest of our week,
may we not just be hearers of the word,
but doers also.
May the Spirit of God fill us to make us kind and compassionate,
honest and humble,
generous and hospitable,
those who repay evil with good,
respond to injustice with action,
overcoming despair with hope.
Let us be known, not by what we're against,
but by what
and who we are for.
And most of all, let us love one another, because God is love.
It's been good to be together.
But now it's time for us to go.
In the name of the Father, who loves us unconditionally.
In the name of the Son, who restores our true humanity.
And in the name of the Spirit, who empowers us to live life to the full.
Amen.
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 Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you felt inspired and challenged by our time together. Now, we know that for what we've heard today to become reality in our daily lives, it's going to take more than this 1 hour a week that we spend together. It requires a daily, moment by moment, everyday commitment to practicing the way of peace and the way of Jesus. That's why we provide a host of ways to continue to lean into God's presence while we're away from each other. As always, you can click the Practice This Week button below the player for daily spiritual exercises to continue to develop the muscles we've started building today. If it helps, you can also opt into the Spiritual Practices notifications on our app to get those helpful reminders every morning as you start your day. As our time together ends, we're going to put some questions on the screen. If you're watching with others, they can serve as great conversation starters and can be adapted to have conversations with people of all ages. But they can also be a great way of processing and personalizing what you've heard today on your own. If you'd like a more personal conversation with someone about anything that's going on in your life, please reach out to our location pastors who will follow up with you privately. You could also fill out a Connect card, which you can find on our website or app. That's all for now. Thanks for joining us and have a great week. Bye.